everyone, and welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, we are going to make one of the most beautiful bags I've ever made. It really is. This pattern completely took me by surprise. It is so fun. It is so cute. I would say beginner friendly depending on your material. Today, we're making the Aviatrix crossbody bag, and this comes to us from Pin It Up Patterns. Now, this is the first time I've ever done a Pin It Up Patterns pattern, and oh my goodness, you guys, I'm obsessed. I am obsessed with this bag. It is a small to medium sized bag. This is a definite everyday bag, especially if you don't have a ton of stuff you have to carry. This is a great everyday purse to put your wallet in and your cell phone and your basic necessities. However, it has a lot going on. It might look like a small bag, but there's a lot going on. So let me walk you through this. It's so cute. Okay, so first let's talk about the strap. I love this crossbody strap. If you've been a part of the channel for a while, you know I prefer to use webbing for my crossbody straps because I don't like to take the extra time to make a strap. However, this one is so beautiful. I highly encourage you to make the strap. On the front of the bag, we have these two flaps. We'll get to that in a minute. On the back of the bag, we have this beautiful little D-ring connector over here to hold your strap. And then we have, you know, my favorite type of zipper with the zipper accent. Very easy to make, very pretty. You can have a lot of fun with your vinyls and your corks and all the different colors you want to use over here. So now let's talk about the cool stuff. Okay, I mean, that was cool too, but okay. We have flap number one. We lift up flap number one. We have magnetic snaps to close it to flap number two. In flap number one, we have a slip pocket, and then we just have like another opening in the bag. So you have an actual slip pocket to tuck in like your cell phone, and then a nice big opening in your bag to put whatever you need in there. Then we open up flap number two. We pull this open, and now when you look up top, we have a zipper pocket here, but it's not just a zipper pocket. We have the zipper pocket, which you can open up, lots of space in there to put whatever you need. However, pull away the rest of the bag. Oh my gosh, we have card slot pockets with a slip pocket. And then on the other side, see if you guys can see it, we have another zipper accent pocket, which looks amazing. Pockets, pockets, pockets. I will tell you, every single pocket is optional. If you don't feel like making card slots, don't make card slots. You only want one zipper accent pocket, just do one. You don't want one on the back, you don't have to do one on the outside. Every single pocket is optional because this is not a bag that we birth. So when I say birth, I mean it's not the type of bag where we sew the exterior and the lining together, leave a hole, and then flip it all right side out, which is usually why we would want to have pockets, because a lot of times we'll flip things out through the pocket. This is a bag that has a drop-in lining. And if you've never heard of a drop-in lining, what it pretty much means is you're going to build the exterior portion of this bag as its own bag, and then you're gonna build the inside of the bag, which is this second flap here, this white flap, and everything inside the lining as another. So it's almost like you build two bags, the inside and the outside, and then you just drop in the lining, and then you top stitch around the top to add it all together. Now, a lot of people are not big fans of drop-in lining. I will be honest, I am not either. I usually tend to avoid bags that are drop-in lining. However, this one was not difficult. The drop-in lining portion was very simple. It was not challenging at all. And honestly, it needed to be that way because when you do the drop-in lining, you don't have to worry about all your material getting wrinkled. You know, when you turn a bag right side out, there's just so much going on. It would be wrinkled beyond belief. And you just don't have to worry about that. It just stays perfect. Like, it looks perfect when you put it all together, and then it just stays perfect. And I love it so much. I love it so, so much. So now I'm gonna say this is a beginner-friendly pattern. That does not mean it is quick, and that does not mean that it is super easy. There's nothing crazy technical about this. There's no rounded corners. These are just boxed corners. Boxing these corners on the inside of the bag, the lining side, will be the most challenging part, but I'm gonna walk you through it. And as long as you're not aiming for perfection, you will be fine and it will still end up perfect. So we'll talk about that when we get to that part of the video. But other than that, there's really nothing about this bag that screams, you need a lot of experience. The zippers are easy. The card slot is easy. The bag, the flaps, everything about this is easy. The one thing you're going to want to think about, if you are a beginner especially, is the material you're using. I would highly encourage you to use a very lightweight faux leather. This is like a faux suede that I'm using, and here is just like a regular kind of gridded vinyl. But they're both lightweight materials. When you're picking the material for the inside of the bag, specifically see this white vinyl is here. If you want to use a canvas, go for it, because there's going to be a lot of layers on the inside, but on the outside I use a lightweight faux leather. If you have more experience and you can use the heavy duty stuff, you know what you're doing. However, if you're just starting out and you want it to look really professional, but you're like, I'm still kind of a beginner, lightweight faux leather is going to be your best bet. I'll have links down below for what I'm using. Everything I'm using today in the tutorial is lightweight, and it all works really well. So thank you so much to Pin It Up Patterns for not only sending over the pattern for me, but also for allowing me to use your pattern on my channel. This has been such a fun bag to make. They have another bag. It's a bigger bag. It has this cute, like vintage vibe to it. I mean, that's kind of their thing, is like the vintage look, but with like a more modern spin. And oh my gosh, I am absolutely in love. Like, now that I've done this one, I'm gonna do the other one right away. I highly encourage you go check out their patterns. They're absolutely beautiful. If you're new to the OklaRoots YouTube channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, shout outs, anything at all, leave them down in the comment section. There's one other pattern at the moment. At time of filming, they have one other pattern. It is on the list, so if you've made it, let me know what you think. If you've made this bag already, let me know what you think. I like I said, I can't rave enough about it. I think it is a wonderful bag to make and a fantastic pattern. All right, guys, let's get started. All right, so for this bag, you're gonna need about a ½ yard of exterior fabric and then about ¼ yard of accent fabric. Now, this can be anything. Specifically for the little zipper accents, you do need to have some sort of a vinyl because those are left raw edges. But other than that, you could use a canvas, a quilt cotton, you could use a vinyl, you could use a cork. You have a lot of options here. I always like something that's easy to keep clean on the exterior, so like a vinyl or cork or faux leather is great for that. For that interior pocket bit, you could use the vinyl. If you're going to do that, I would suggest a very lightweight vinyl because there are a lot of layers. Or you could instead switch to your lining material, like a water-resistant canvas or a quilt cotton canvas, anything like that. And then from your lining fabric, you're going to need at least ¾ yard. I'm going to mix it up a little bit. I like the pockets to kind of pop, so I'm going to be using this solid for most of the lining, but then for the pockets, like the credit card pocket and the slip pocket, I'm going to be using this little polka dot water-resistant canvas. You could use quilt cotton again. I just prefer to use things I don't have to interface. The pattern has suggestions for 3 different types of interfacing: a light woven interfacing, like for quilt cotton, things like that, a medium woven interfacing, such as EB Fuse Medium, and a heavy woven interfacing like a Decovil Light. I'm only going to be using the Decovil Light pieces today. I will not be using the medium or lightweight interfacing. Alright, so here's most of the hardware for today. You're going to have 3 different zippers. You're going to have 2 that are 9 inches long and 1 that is 10 inch long. So make sure you have enough of your zipper tape for that. You're going to have 3 zipper pulls to go with it. These are all number 5 zippers. I would say on 2 of the pockets you could definitely get away with a number 3 zipper. On the 2 accent pockets with the little zipper accent detailing, both of those are pretty narrow, so if you had a number 3 zipper you wanted to use, you could use those for that. You're going to need 2 3/4 inch D-rings, 2 1-inch swivel snaps, and a 1-inch slider. Because we are building this strap from vinyl, we do want a slider that has a bigger mouth. So you can see this is pretty big compared to a lot of our other sliders. This is going to be really helpful when we're building our strap. Now, if you're just using webbing for your strap, then you don't have to use such a big slider. You could use a smaller one. Next, we have some double cap rivets. The pattern suggests having 4 medium and 2 smalls. I just have mediums for all of it. And then you're going to need 4 magnetic snap sets. I love these magnetic snaps because they don't use the prongs. They actually have like a rivet back, which means I don't have to worry about the prongs breaking or ripping at material over time. So you're going to have 4 sets of your magnetic snaps. And of course, I always have my bag tag to go on my bag. Alright, so here's most of the other stuff I'll be using today. I have my rivet press as always because I will be using it for the magnetic snaps and the rivets. For the rivets, I have the rivet die set, and then here is my magnetic die set, a hole punch, a healthy supply of plastic clover clips. For the top thread, I will be using a Tex 45 weight thread. This comes from Saya Swag. In the bobbin, I will be using a Gutermann thread from Joann's. Then I have 2 different needle sizes. I have an 80-12 and a 90-14. I'm using a lot of faux leather. Even though it is lightweight, they do add up in layers, especially when we're boxing the bottom. So because of that, I do like to pull out the 90-14, but for the most part, I will be using an 80-12 needle today. Then I have a lighter to clean up any loose ends, a silver ink pen, and a fabric air erasing marker, a turning tool, my seam ripper and stiletto combo, some snips for the sewing machine. We're going to be using a lot of double-sided tape today, so make sure it is double-sided tape that is easy to sew over, nothing too sticky. Think wash away double-sided tape, something lightweight. And then, as always, a 1" by 6" ruler. So let's go through our pattern pieces. First, we have pattern pieces A and B. A is going to be your accent panel exterior, and B is going to be your accent flat panel lining. These all need to be cut out with the pattern piece facing up and your material also facing right side up. So just like this, orientation is important here. If any of these require woven interfacing because they are quilt cotton, make sure you add the woven interfacing onto them. Pattern piece C is going to be your main front panel. You're going to need 1 cut of your exterior material and 1 cut of your lining for that. And to go with that, pattern piece D is your main front and back panel interfacing. So this is that Decovil light. We have one for the front panel, one for the back panel. The front and back panel are not the same size, but we will use the same size interfacing for them. Pattern piece E is going to be your main back panel. You're going to have 1 cut of your exterior and 1 cut of lining. Pattern piece F is going to be your main flap lining panel. This is going to be your lining material. And then panel piece G is your main flap exterior panel. Once again, orientation of how you cut these out matters. Pattern piece up, material right side up. And to go with that, we have pattern piece H, which is our main flat panel exterior interfacing. When you cut this out, it is glue right side up. Pattern piece right side up, glue right side up, just like that. And this is just that Decovil light. Then we have pattern piece I. This is for the center divider. Now, all these pieces are on the inside of the bag, so you can consider this lining material. Pattern has you have 2 cuts of exterior. I'm using that faux leather for this. However, if you have a thick vinyl, don't use it here. Use something more lightweight. It doesn't need to be vinyl. It can be your lining material. It can be water resistant canvas. It can be quilt cotton. It can be a lightweight vinyl, but this is gonna go inside of the exterior. It's like a bag inside of a bag, and so you get a lot of layers. So just be careful with thickness here. You can use a thick vinyl on the exterior, just don't use it here on this. But you're gonna need 2 cuts of your exterior material and 2 cuts of lining material for this. Then you're going to have 2 zipper overlays. You can see this is just where I'm using that darker green one. This is a fun place if you have some scraps of vinyl that you just want to use that kind of pop on the bag. You can go rogue with this. So I have 2 cuts of my vinyl here. It does need to be vinyl because it is going to be raw edge. One of these is going to go on the outside of the bag. One of them is going to go on the inside of the bag, so they can be different colors. They don't have to be the same. Next up, we have our 2 zipper pocket linings. So there are, again, those 2 accent zipper pockets. You're going to have lining for each. One is bigger, one is smaller. The smaller one is for the exterior. The bigger one is for the interior. Just make sure you kind of keep them pinned together so you don't get these mixed up because they are very similar rectangle sizes, and we do want to keep them separate. Next, we have our zipper tabs. You're just going to have 2 cuts of this out of your lining material. And then you're going to have your slip pocket pieces. This is for the inside of the bag. So you're going to have your lining material for the slip pocket, and then you're going to have a little accent cut of vinyl for the top of that slip pocket. All right, next are our strap cuts. You're going to have 1 cut that is long and thick and another cut that is thinner. The thinner one does need to be vinyl, something that can have raw edges. And so this part here, this thinner part here, will be left raw edged. The bigger part, the wider one here, we are going to tuck these raw edges back. It won't have any raw edges, but the thinner one will. So if you want to edge coat this, be my guest. It'll take a while, but it will look amazing. I'm not going to edge coat it, but I just want you to know this thinner one here cannot be any sort of a quilt cotton. It will have raw edges exposed. All right, next we have the strap connector. This is just on the back of the bag. This is where we're going to install the D-rings. It's a really cool way to do it. I like it a lot. And then we have card slots. We have our card slot panel, which is a nice long rectangle, and then the card slot back panel. I will tell you, all pockets are optional. If you don't want to make the card slots, don't. If you don't want to make the slip pocket, don't. If you don't want to do the zippers with the overlays, you don't have to. All pockets are optional. There are quite a few of them. I highly recommend you make all of them, especially if you haven't made any of these ones before, because you're going to get a lot of practice. I love every single one of these pockets. I couldn't do them better. So, but they are all optional. You don't have to make them if you're not feeling it. All right, let's get started on this strap. Now, if you've been watching the channel for a while, you know I do not like making my own straps. I love using webbing. I very rarely make my own straps. However, this strap is so beautiful that I'm making it. It is worth making this strap. Trust me. So on the wider material, the wider part of your strap, you're going to mark in 1 inch from the short edges and just draw a line on the wrong side of your strap. And then just grab some of your double-sided tape and add the double-sided tape just outside of that line, closer towards the raw edge. We're using this so we can tape back these raw edges and they'll look nice and neat. So then you can remove the paper from the tape and fold that short edge wrong side back to meet that 1 inch mark, so you're folding it back by 1/2 inch. All right, now on the wrong side of your wider strap, you're gonna mark a midpoint line going right down the center of the strap, all the way from end to end, and then grab your double-sided tape and lay your double-sided tape right over that mark. So do your best to center it on top of that line, because we just want to use one piece of tape to hold both sides back. So both the long edges need to be able to use this tape. So you can see I'm just going to go along the line, pushing the tape over it, and then remove the paper from the tape and gently fold back your material so it's long sides, wrong sides together and meeting that middle mark. Now if you notice over here on the corner that it's hard to kind of get this corner to stay folded, you can snip it down just a little bit so you don't have to worry about that corner of your vinyl poking out in the end. There we go. So you can just kind of angle that off and then slowly fold this back, and any bits that aren't catching the tape, or maybe the tape's just not quite sticky enough, you can grab your clips and you can use clips to hold it back. And then once you have one side folded back, do the same thing with the other side. Yes, this does take a little bit of time, but it's worth it, trust me. Okay, once you have your strap folded wrong sides back and it's clipped and taped how you need it, you're going to measure in 1/2 inch, again on the back side here, 1/2 inch from each short side and make a mark. Okay, once you have that 1/2 inch marked, we're going to grab more double-sided tape, and you're going to add double-sided tape right over the raw edges where they meet, so pretty much right over the previous double-sided tape, starting from that 1/2 inch mark on the side and then ending on the other 1/2 inch mark. Just carefully do this. This should also help hold down these raw edges if you find that they're kind of pulling up from the tape. This second layer of tape is going to help hold them down. All right, now once you have your tape applied, once again, remove the paper and then grab your skinnier cut of vinyl here, and you're going to center it over the back side of the wider strap, lining up the edge with that 1/2 inch mark. And you can see it's just a scotch more narrow than our folded strap now. So just carefully go along the edge here. You can remove the clips as you go. You can re-add them if you feel like you need to. Totally up to you. Just do your best to keep this nice and flat and straight. There we go. And just push it right over that tape. Remember, this is the wrong side of that wider strap. So for me, it's the pink strap. This is on the wrong side of the pink strap. And my more narrow strap is right side up. All right, once you get to the other end, if you find that your vinyl extends beyond the 1/2 inch mark that you have, you can just trim it down. All right, now we're gonna take our strap to the sewing machine. Isn't this pretty? This is the back side of the strap, this is the front side. If you have a bobbin color that does not go with this, you need to change your bobbin out because your bobbin thread will be seen on one side or the other. I'm going to top stitch this down with this accent piece right side up, and I'm going to top stitch around all the edges of my strap at an 1/8 inch seam allowance, an 1/8 inch in from the accent piece, not an 1/8 inch in from the pink piece on the back here. And again, so that means my bobbin thread will be seen on the quote-unquote right side of our strap. So go ahead and top stitch around the entire strap at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, once your strap is top stitched, you're gonna grab your 2 swivel hooks, your strap slider, and your rivets. You also want your rivet press and your hole punch, and then the correct dies to go with your rivets. So now we're just gonna build the strap. So take one end of your strap and then take your strap slider, and with your strap slider facing right side up, you're going to take the back side of your strap, and I am going to have the accent side be the back side because it does have this end over here and I don't want that to be noticeable in the end. I'm going to slide my strap up from the bottom edge over that middle bar, just like this. Now you don't have to double fold it or anything like that. You can just have it fold over by about 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, nice and tight around that middle bar of your slider. And then grab your hole punch and punch a hole right in the center, pretty close to the edge, but not cutting any thread. And then grab a rivet and insert the rivet into that hole and snap in place. There we go. Now you can grab your rivet press and press this down just to set it. And there you go. How simple is that? That way you don't have to stitch it, you don't have to worry about little X's and bulky layers with your sewing machine or anything like that. So now with the back side up, which is so beautiful, with the wrong side up, back side up, go to the other end of your strap, grab your swivel and insert your swivel so that the bar side is on the accent side, and just slide it on like that. Now, keeping your strap straight, pull the accent sides, right sides together, and then take the other end of your strap and insert it from the bottom on the same side that the fold over is, up and over that middle bar. So this is what you should have now. You have one swivel hook just hanging on the strap, you have your slider in the center, and then you have your other edge over here. You're gonna grab your remaining swivel hook, insert it so it's swivel, right side up, bars on the accent side, fold over that edge of your material by about 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch, just enough so that you can set a rivet in there, and then punch a hole in the center and insert your rivet and snap it in place. And then grab your rivet press and press in place. And there you go. Now you have this beautiful crossbody strap with that fun accent. It really isn't a lot of extra work. I mean, the hardest part is probably cutting out the material. But especially with rivets, it makes it so easy. So now you can set this to the side. Okay, now we're gonna work on the card slots, so make sure you have your large card slot panel and your card slot back panel. The pattern's gonna give you a series of lines to mark on your card slot panel. These are difficult to see in the video, I apologize, but they're there. So make sure you know where the top is. Starting on the second line, you're gonna fold your material, wrong sides together, right along that line. And remember, these are marked on the right side of your material. The lines are marked on the right side. Give it a good pinch. If you're using quilt cotton here, you're gonna wanna use an iron and iron these down. Take that first fold and bring it up to line number 1. So first fold, which is on the second line, is gonna come up and meet line number 1. Might seem a little confusing in the beginning, but once you start working with this, you'll get the hang of it and you'll understand the process, and it's very simple then. So I'm just using clips to pin this down. I'm gonna flatten it out with my fingers. Next, I'm gonna go to the fourth line, which is, so there's a third line right here. The fourth line is right down here. I'm gonna go to that fourth line and I'm going to pinch that also, wrong sides together, right along that line. So I'm just folding it on that line. And then I'm gonna bring that fold up to the third line just to meet it. And I'm going to clip it in place. There we go. And then press it down nicely. Again, if you're using an iron, go ahead and do that. Now we're gonna go to the sixth line, which is the next furthest one down. So there's the fifth line right here, close to the top. We're gonna go down to the sixth line and fold right along that mark, wrong sides together, and then bring that fold up to the fifth line. So you see how this is working out, how we're spacing out our folds to create these little pockets. Okay, and then I'm gonna go to the last line on the bottom here and I'm gonna pinch again, folding the material wrong sides together right along that line. There we go. And then I'm going to bring that fold up to the last visible line and I'm going to clip this in place. All right, now would be a good time to grab your iron and give this a nice press because we don't want to lose this shape, but we are going to be unfolding it while we top stitch. So what we want to do now, after you have it pressed down, is go to the sewing machine and you want to top stitch right along the top of each fold at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. You will have to unfold pieces in order to do that, so I just kind of carefully unclip a little bit at a time, fold back the material, and top stitch along the top of each fold at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I do like to back stitch at the beginning and the end of these as well. All right, once you have all those top stitched, if you had to kind of unfold everything, just refold it. Hopefully your lines are still there if you need them. Just refold everything and get it all lined up again. Okay, so once you have it refolded and set, if you want to press it again, go ahead and do that. And we're going to top stitch along the sides now at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance to hold this in place. All right, once the sides are stitched in place, use the midpoint marks on the top and bottom of your card slot pocket and draw a line with the fabric erasable marker, some sort of heat erasing, air erasing, whatever, erasable marker. Draw a line right along the middle of your card slots, and starting at the bottom, we're going to top stitch up over one side of that line, go over at the top card slot, and then go back down the other side of that line to secure these divided pockets in place. All right, now your card slot pockets are all done. Grab your card slot back panel here. You're gonna lay the card slots and the back panel right sides together. They should be the same size. If they're not, you can trim down the bottom edge of your card slot panel here. But I find both times they've been the same size. So we're just clipping them right sides together along all 4 edges, but we're not going to sew everything. Okay, make sure you know which side is the bottom side, because on the bottom side you're going to mark a 5-inch centered space. So 5 inches centered on the bottom edge here. We're going to stitch around all 4 edges of this at a 1/4 inch seam allowance except between these 2 marks. So starting at 1 mark, we're going to backstitch, stitch around other 3 sides at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then stop once you get to the other mark, making sure you backstitch well. All right, once you have it sewn, grab your scissors and just carefully clip these corners. Don't cut too close to the thread because you don't want it to come undone, especially if you're using the water-resistant canvas. Now I'm going to grab my turning tool and I'm going to gently flip this right side out. Okay, now once we have this right side out, I will tell you the side seams can be very bulky. Because you're folding all those card slots back on themselves. So it can be very bulky, which is why it's important to use a lightweight material here. If you want to trim that seam down a little bit more, you definitely can. All right, once you've got it all flattened out and turned out, now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to just top stitch only along the top edge. So the top edge of the card slot pocket, we're going to top stitch at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I do suggest you back stitch at the beginning and the end, and I also like to pull all the threads to the back side and tie them off into knots as well. Okay, so now let's add the interfacing to our main panels. This is the only interfacing I'm adding because again, I'm not using woven interfacing, I'm only using the Decovil Light. So starting with the main flat panel, grab pattern piece G and pattern piece H. And remember when you did pattern piece H, it's glue side up. So when you flip over G and you flip over H, you should be able to line them up pretty perfectly. I just kind of eyeball the seam allowance, but you can measure if you'd like. But I'm just going to eyeball it just like this. And then I'm going to take this to the iron, and I'm just going to cover this with a piece of scrap quilt cotton. I use it as a pressing cloth. So just a piece of scrap quilt cotton over the back of this, and I'm going to press this in place with my iron. And then we're going to repeat that with the main back panel and the main front panel. And again, this is always being done with the exterior pieces. So exterior wrong side up, glue side down, center it just like that, and then press that in place, and then repeat that with your main front panel. All right, once you have the Decovil Light adhered to your pieces, you can set these all to the side. All right, so now let's make the center divider pocket. So we're going to start by building the zipper. Grab your 10-inch long zipper tape, and if you haven't already, grab a lighter and melt down the raw edges so it doesn't fray so much. And then grab your 2 little zipper tabs, and on the wrong side of your zipper tabs, mark a midpoint line going down the center of each, and then take the parallel raw edge and bring it up to meet that midpoint line. And then do the same with the other raw edge. These are squares, so it doesn't really matter which edge you measure from for your midpoint. So they're both wrong sides meeting that midpoint line, and then fold it again in half. So you have double fold on one side, single fold on the other. Kind of looks like a hot dog bun. Grab a clip and just clip that. So do the same thing with the other zipper tab. If you want to use double-sided tape here to help hold everything in place, go ahead and do that. So now grab your zipper, and you're going to just take your little zipper tab and just wrap it around the end of the zipper tape. So you just open it up, the double folds go down, the single fold stays on the top. And it like just gives it a litit's like it's eating the end of the zipper tape. Now we can take this to the sewing machine and let's top stitch along the inner folded edges of each of these zipper tabs at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you have this top stitch down, grab some scissors and just trim down the zipper tabs so that they're the same width as the zipper tape. And now we want to find the midpoint mark on our zipper tape. So just fold it in half. And you can use a marking tool or you can use scissors to cut just a teeny tiny triangle right on the edge. But if you do that, you do need to make sure you melt down that edge or else it can fray over time and the zipper can completely fray out of the material, which would be terrible. So you see we have these little clips that make it really easy to see the midpoint, but you'll also want to grab a lighter and just melt those down. So now grab your center divider pieces, and if you haven't already, mark midpoints on the top edges of all 4 pieces. So the 2 exterior and the 2 lining. Remember, you don't have to use a thick exterior material for the exterior cuts. It's kind of like the exterior of the lining. It's not the exterior of the bag. So this can be a more lightweight material. It does not have to be vinyl. So now grab one of your exterior pieces and lay it right side up, and then grab your zipper and lay it right side down. And I'm going to have the zipper closing towards the left when closed. Match up your midpoint marks on the top edge of your center panel with your zipper tape and clip these right sides together. The zipper will not reach the edge of the center panel. It's not supposed to. That's why we have the midpoints marked. All right, now I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine. I'm just gonna baste this down at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you have that basted on, grab one of your lining panels and lay it so that the lining panel is right side down on the wrong side of the zipper, and just match it up with that top edge of the exterior panel and clip together. And now I'm going to sew along this clipped edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Once you have those stitched in place, go ahead and press these two panels wrong sides together. I like to line up the bottom corners first, just to make sure it all stays pretty straight. It doesn't have to be perfect. And flip this over and straighten out the seam right by the zipper. So if you want to use an iron, if you're using material that can be ironed, you can iron this. Otherwise, just give it a good finger press. Okay, now we're going to go top stitch along this top edge by the zipper tape, but only where the zipper tape is. So you're not going all the way to the edges over here. You're only going as far as the zipper ends. And I do like to back stitch at the beginning and the end of this top stitching. And then I also do pull all the threads to the back on the lining side, and I knot them and tie them off. All right, once you have that done, we're going to repeat with the other side. I'll walk you through it. So take your other exterior middle panel, lay it right side up, take your zipper, lay it right side down, match up those midpoint marks along the top edge, and clip these right sides together. And now we're going to go to the sewing machine and just baste along this top clipped edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you have it top stitched, grab the lining panel and lay the lining panel right side down. And just match it up with that top exterior panel and just clip these together so the lining is right side down over the back side of the zipper. And now we're going to sew along this clipped edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. And once you have those sewn together, press the lining up. I always just like to give it a quick finger press and then flip this over and press the exterior back so the lining and exterior are wrong sides together, and just press along the edge by the zipper. There we go. And then once again, we're going to go top stitch right along this top edge by the zipper, but only where the zipper tape is, so don't go past the zipper ends, and back stitch at the beginning and the end. And if you'd like, you can tie off the threads on the back side as well. All right, once you have both sides attached and top stitched, you're going to pull the exterior panels right sides together and the lining panels right sides together. Okay, we're specifically working with the lining side here, not the exterior side. So grab your lining panels, pulling them right sides together, and line up all the edges and clip along all these edges. Okay, now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along the sides and the bottom edges at 1/4 inch seam allowance, not these little boxed bits right here, just the bottom edge and these two slanted sides. You're going to start and stop on the sides at about 1/4 inch from where the zipper is. So we're not trying to get the exterior or anything like that. So just start about 1/4 inch from the zipper, back stitch, go down, back stitch at the beginning and the end of each spot, go slowly, and again, you don't sew the boxed areas, you only sew the sides and the bottom edge. Alrighty, so this is what you have now. Lining is all sewn, exterior is unsewn. We want to leave the exterior unsewn because we are going to add a few more things to it first. So flip this so you're looking at the exterior right side up, and when the zipper closes, it closes towards the left, opens towards the right. This is the exterior panel we're working on at the moment. Okay, so now we're going to add the card slot pocket to this panel, and this can be a little tricky because it's very, very bulky on these edges here, so you might want to change your needle now to a stronger needle. But use a marker and find the midpoint on the center of your center panel here, and measure 1 inch down, and use the midpoint on the top of your card slot pocket here to center this and tape it in place. So now we're going to take this to a sewing machine and we're going to top stitch along the sides and the bottom at 1/8 inch seam allowance. Like I said, it can be very, very bulky over here on the side, so if you need to increase your needle size, maybe even to a jeans needle, go ahead and do that. Go slow, back stitch at the beginning and the end. Alrighty, once you have that sewn in place, set this to the side for just a little bit. Okay, now it's very important to pay attention to the pattern and know what flaps you're working on, because remember there are 2 different flaps here. I did mix this up in the beginning when I first made it, and I had to redo it, so pay attention. We're working on pattern piece B right now, okay? So we're looking at the accent panel lining panel. You're gonna have placement marks here for 2 male snaps. So I've already got my hardware for the male snaps. I'm gonna lay my pattern piece right side up over the right side of my lining piece And then using those marks, I'm going to poke a hole through the paper and transfer these marks onto my lining piece. There we go. So now grab your hole punch and punch a hole where those 2 dots are. Or if you're using magnetic snaps with prongs, you're going to use the washer for the prongs and you're going to mark the slits for those prongs. Now grab a scrap of Decovil light and I'm just going to cut 2 small rectangles and I'm going to punch holes through each of these as well. Again, if you're using magnetic snaps with prongs, instead you would mark the placement for the prongs and use a seam ripper to cut those. So I'm going to grab a male end of my magnetic snap and I'm going to push it through so the male end is on the right side of the material. Flipping this over, I'm going to add a piece of Decovil light over the back of it and then I'm going to add the cap just like that. I'm going to repeat with the other one. So now I'm going to grab my rivet press and I'm going to find the bottom die that looks like the female end. I'm going to put that in the press and then I'm going to use my top die that looks like what you would use for a rivet. And I'm going to flip this over so it's rivet side up and I'm just going to press this in place. And there we go. We have the male ends installed. Now you're going to grab your accent flap panel exterior, so this is your exterior material, and lay the pattern piece right side up on the right side of your vinyl. And then using the female snap placement marks here, you're going to just transfer those marks over to your exterior material, and then grab your hole punch and punch holes where those dots are. So this time we're going to install the female snaps. So I have my 2 female snaps, and then once again I'm going to cut just a couple scrap pieces of my Decovil light. And I'm going to punch holes in those as well. The point of the Decovil light with this is that it's going to make sure that when you use these and these are magnetic snaps are tugging on the material doesn't tear apart because the material is not the sturdiest, especially the lining material. So now I'm going to grab a female snap and I'm going to insert that so the female is on the right side of the material, flip it over, add the Decovil light to the back, add the cap to the back of that. Repeat on the other side. I'm going to switch out my dies. So now my bottom die looks like the male end of the snap. Insert that in. Flip this snap side down and press in place. And the reason I like using these types of snaps instead of the ones with the prongs is, again, because this is a nice smooth back. This is not going to wear down material. There's nothing sharp on here. It's very easy to work with. So as these materials are used together, I don't have to worry about anything getting torn or anything like that. So now take your accent and exterior pieces and lay them wrong sides up. And then using a ruler, mark 1 inch down from the top edge of each of your flaps. Grab some double-sided tape and add some tape just right above that 1 inch line on both panels. Remove the paper from your tape and then fold that raw edge, the raw top edge, back, wrong side down. So wrong sides together and having the raw edge meet up with that drawn line. Here we go. So do this for both the lining and the exterior. All right, once you have this folded down, now we're going to take our lining and our exterior accent flaps and we're going to lay them right sides together. And clip along all the edges to hold in place. And if you're like, hey, my magnetic snaps don't come together, like here's one, the other one's down here. They're not supposed to. These are not snaps that work together. They work with other parts of the bag. Okay, so I've got the sides and the bottom clipped. We're not going to sew along the top edge. We're going to sew along the sides and the bottom at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So all the clipped edges, 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end well. All right, once you have it sewn, we want to trim down the corners. So just trim down these corners first. And you can trim down the seam allowance just a bit too if you'd like to help reduce bulk. Now you're going to flip this flap right side out. This is another good spot to use your turning tool. You want to get these angles poked out as much as possible because that's what gives the bag such a cool look, is these really polished angles on those flaps. All right, now go around the seams and straighten them out nice and neat. You want to try to straighten them so that the lining isn't peeking through on the front. All right, once you get this nice and flat, we're going to take it to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch along the sides and the bottom at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Again, we're not sewing the top yet. We're going to sew that down in just a moment to the bag. I do like to back stitch at the beginning and the end, and I do leave the tails long and tie them in knots on the lining side. Go slow with this. You might also find it's easiest to use a zipper foot because down here on the bottom, on the lining side, some of these magnetic snaps get very close to the seam. Okay, so now grab your center divider, and we're working on the exterior panel here that does not have a pocket. So we have a card slot pocket over here. This is the other one. Mark a midpoint on the top edge of your exterior panel by the zipper. Also mark a midpoint on the top edge of your accent flap on the exterior side. On the lining side, let's add a bit of double-sided tape right along the top edge of our pocket. Now this is optional if you don't want to add the double-sided tape. You don't have to. You could tape this down and hold in place instead. So what I did over here was I measured from my center midpoint here, I measured 3/4 of an inch down and I made a little dot. And then I also went ahead and drew a horizontal line. This is all using an air erasing marker. This will not last in the end, which is important. So now remove the paper from your tape and you're going to lay your flap exterior right side up. The midpoint on the exterior part of your flap on the top here is going to line up with the midpoint that's marked on that 3/4 of an inch line that's down from the top edge. The flap overhangs towards the pocket side, so it goes just like this. It covers the zipper. So just line this up and tape that down. Again, if you want to use paper tape or something somewhere else to hold it down, do that. I'm just going to tape it down like this. There we go. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this to a sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch along the top edge. So if I held it like this, the top edge of the flap at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance until I get to my side seam over here. Then I'm going to go down to a 3/8 inch seam allowance, turn around, and I'm going to do another row of top stitching at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Again, 3/8 of an inch from the top edge of the flap. Cover the other short side of the flap and backstitch. So backstitch at the beginning and end of this. This is going to secure the flap in place. All right, there we go. Now our flap is top stitched in place. You can see in the end, this is kind of how it looks. It's going to peek out the front of the bag like this. It's so stinking cute. Now I'm going to add the 3 rivets like the pattern suggests. I didn't do the box like it told us to, so I'm just going to add 1 rivet in the center of my little rectangle here with the 2 parallel lines. So I'm going to add 1 rivet here in the center, and then I'm going to add 1 rivet at each corner as well. I'm making sure I'm not cutting through any thread though. So when I punch these holes out, I'm only punching through the material, not any thread. And there we go. How stinking cute is that? I love this little flap so much. All right, you can set this to the side for a little bit. Okay, so now grab your main flap lining panel and your main flap exterior panel, and working on the main flap lining panel, which is pattern piece F. If you're looking at the picture in the pattern, I do believe the picture is wrong. It says pattern piece D on it, which is not this one. So just don't get confused by that. So pattern piece F, right side up, lining right side up. We have our placement for our male snaps here. So just like before, we just poked a hole through them and we're transferring those marks over to the lining panel. And then punch out a hole where those marks are, or use your washer to center and cut the slits for the prongs of your magnetic snap. And regardless of which way you're doing it, make sure you do grab a scrap piece of Decovil light, especially because this is on a lining panel. And mark your slits or punch your hole for your snap on this as well. So grab your 2 male snaps and you're going to insert so that the male snap is on the right side of the material. Flip it over, add the interfacing to the back, and then add the cap or washer, and then open the prongs on the back. Do the same thing with the other side. And then I'm going to grab my rivet press and I'm going to press these snaps in place. So then grab your main panel exterior, which is pattern piece G, and you're going to lay it right side down, right sides together with the lining panel. Now we're going to just clip these right sides together along the sides and the bottom. Just like we did with the other flap, we're going to leave the top unclipped because we're going to flip it all through the top in just a moment. Once you have these clipped, we're going to sew along the sides and the bottom edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Do not sew along this top straight edge. Everywhere else so you do so. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. Once you have this sewn, go around and just trim all the corners. So, and you can just trim the seam allowance down a little bit as well. If you'd like, you can trim it down to like a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Just shave off a bit of it. This will help us get nice and neat, straight edges and clean corners. Now turn your flap so it's right side out, and then grab a turning tool and poke out those corners and straighten out those seams so it's nice, it has strong angles everywhere. And then I'm just going to go around all the seams, straightening them out, getting them nice and clean, and I'm going to use clips to keep them where I want them. All right, now we can take this to the sewing machine and let's just top stitch along all the edges except for the top edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, once you have this top stitched, you can set this to the side for just a moment. So now grab your strap connector, and on the wrong side, you're going to draw a midpoint mark going straight down the center. Grab some double-sided tape and lay your double-sided tape right over that midpoint mark. Remove the paper, and then fold the long raw edges back, wrong sides together to meet that midpoint line, and push it down onto the tape. If you need to use clips as well here to hold it in place for now, you can do that. We're going to add more tape to help with this in just a moment, but if it's coming undone really easily, just add some clips. Okay, so the pattern suggests on the wrong side marking in from the short edges 3 inches. And then we're going to fold the ends back. I found that I could make my strap a little bit longer, so instead from each short edge I marked in 2.5 inches. And then I'm going to add a little bit of double-sided tape just above the mark, so closer towards the short end on both sides here. And then grab your D-ring and thread it on so that the straight side of the D-ring is on the back side, and then wrap around that short edge, fold it over towards the back so it meets up with that 2.5 inch mark. There we go. Again, use clips if you feel like you need to. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side, adding the other D-ring to the other side. All right, once you have the short edges folded down, grab some more double-sided tape. I know, so much double-sided tape, I told you. And we're going to add this right over the back, so right over the back side of those raw edges, and also over the back of the fold over. You can remove your clips now because that tape will help hold it all down. Okay, so now lay your strap connector wrong side up. You can remove the paper. Grab your flap and lay it lining side up and center it over your strap connector and have it go below the top edge by about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So don't have the top edge of your flap meet the top edge of your strap connector because then the raw edges will show in the end. We need it to go down by just about 1/8, just a scotch. All right, once you have it taped on there, just double check from the front side that you can't see the raw edges or anything. That's looking cute. So now you're gonna grab your main back panel, exterior panel, and let's find the midpoint mark on the top edge of this. And then I measured down 1 3/4 of an inch from the top edge, and I just kind of pulled down that midpoint mark so I know where that is. And then we also want to mark the midpoint on the top edge here of our strap connector. So just fold everything in half and mark the midpoint on here. And now you guessed it, more tape. Yeah, there's a lot of tape. So add some double-sided tape to the back of your flap here. And only on the flat piece, not on the strap connector part. And now you can remove the paper from your tape. It's on the lining side. And now we're going to flip this over so we have exterior of back panel right side up and then exterior flap and strap connector right side up. And the flap is overhanging the top of the back panel. And we're just going to line up the midpoint on our strap connector with the midpoint on that 1 3/4 inch line and just line up the bottom edge, top edge, depending how you're looking at it. Line up the edge that we're working on with that 1 3/4 inch marked line. There we go. So this is how it should look now. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to top stitch along all 4 edges of my strap connector at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to use a zipper foot and I'm going to get as close as I can to this D-ring over here. And then I'm also going to add rivets after that. Okay, great. That's looking so cute, isn't it? And so I'm glad that I extended it a little bit. The reason I extended the strap connector by just a little bit and I changed a little bit of the measurements was because on the first bag I realized like when you pulled up on the side here, it didn't quite cover the edge of the flap. Like I could still see some of the like raw edges on the corner of the flap. And so by just making it just a tiny bit longer, it completely covers it. So that looks great. So now I'm just gonna add a couple of rivets. I'm just gonna center them close to the edge, so close to the sides of my stitching, but again, not too close, and I'm not cutting the stitching in any way. This is just going to help reinforce where these straps are, so as they get pulled on, all the weight is not being just put on those stitches. The rivets will help absorb some of the stress. All right, now the rivets have been added. How stinking cute does this look? You can set this to the side for just a moment. Now we're going to do our zipper overlay, and if you've been on the channel for a moment, you know how much I love to do zippers like this. I have a whole tutorial going over this zipper method. It's my favorite. So I have my zipper overlay panel. I'm working on the exterior zipper overlay right now. So if you have a specific panel you're using for that, grab that one and add some double-sided tape along both edges on the back side. And then grab your main back panel exterior where you just added the flap, and we're going to transfer some marks. So lay your pattern piece, matching up the bottom left corner here and the sides. And then I just poked holes in the corner of this zipper overlay image here, just right in the corners. Just mark those holes there. So I'm transferring those 2 dots to the back panel here. And then I flip over my pattern piece and I'm gonna do the same thing on the right side. Just try to get everything lined up and transfer those corner marks just like that. All right, because I find most of the time that's all I need are those corners. I don't need the full rectangle drawn out. So I'm gonna take the paper off the top tape. So if you have a directional print on your overlay, we're working on the top side here. And I'm going to match up the corners of the inside of this rectangle with those corner dots that I marked on my back panel. And just center it, there we go. Press it down. And you can see the window on this is pretty narrow. I think it's about a 3/8 of an inch window. So it is a smaller window. You could definitely use a 1/2 inch window. If you have your own zipper template you want to use, you could definitely use your own. So once you have this stuck in place, we're going to go around the outside of the zipper overlay and top stitch at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, once you have that sewn on, you're going to take a seam ripper and you're going to rip the back panel through the opening of the zipper overlay. So we're not cutting the zipper overlay, we're only cutting the back panel. So insert your scissors and carefully slide your scissors underneath the short edges, just cutting a straight line here. Okay, and then flip this over. Lift up the back panel away from the zipper overlay and trim down the material. So the goal here is that we don't see any of these raw edges from the back panel when we look through our zipper overlay, but it doesn't mean it has to be looking real nice on the back. It can look like a mess on the back. That's totally fine. No one's gonna see the back. All right, this is what the overlay should look like now. It has a nice clean opening on the front. Just set this to the side for a moment. So now grab your 9-inch zipper in your exterior zipper lining panels. So these are the shorter ones. The lining ones are taller, but it's 2 sets. So lay the taller of the 2 panels right side up, and then grab your zipper and lay it right side up and line it up with the top edge. Make sure when the zipper closes, it closes towards the left. And then clip the zipper tape to the top edge of this lining panel. And now we're gonna sew down this top edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once you have that sewn on, flip the lining away from the zipper and give it a good finger press. You can iron this if you'd like, but you want to get it as flat as possible. All right, so now grab the shorter, this is the bottom lining panel, and lay it right side up. Rotate your zipper and lay the other side of your zipper tape right side up over that long edge and clip these together. And now let's sew along this clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once you have that sewn on, just like you did on the other side, pull the lining panel away from the zipper and press so that this is all nice and flat. The zipper is nice and flat, the lining is nice and flat. There we go. So once you have those sewn on, grab some double-sided tape and add double-sided tape right along the very, very edge of your zipper tape. Try to make sure the tape doesn't extend past the stitching. That's key here. So add this tape to both sides of your zipper tape. All right, once you have this part set up, grab your exterior panel, and what we're gonna do is we're pretty much just gonna lay this right over the zipper. So you wanna make sure it's centered, but you have plenty of space on both sides, so if it's not perfectly centered, that's okay. I removed the paper from the top tape of my zipper tape, and then I'm gonna take my exterior panel and I'm gonna lay it right side up, right over the top of that zipper. And I'm gonna look on both sides to make sure it's overhanging about the same amount on both sides, and the zipper teeth are centered in that inside window. Pull the zipper pull through and do your best to get this situated. Nice thing about tape is that it's not permanent, so if you need to lift it up, move it around, you can. All right, once you get the zipper where you want it, make sure the zipper pulls again through the window, lift up your back panel, and then take the paper off of that bottom piece of double-sided tape, and then flip the panel back down and tape the bottom in place. There we go. So now we're gonna go to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch along the inner rectangle here, just outside of it, at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, now we have the zipper top stitch in place. Let's flip this over and look at the lining side. You're gonna take the top lining panel and bring it down, right sides together with the bottom lining panel, and it should pretty much match up. It might be just like a little bit longer, but for the most part, it should completely match up. So let's just clip around the sides and the bottom. And then when you sew the sides and the bottom, you're gonna sew this with the back panel facing right side up. You're gonna pull it away from the zipper. If you have any double-sided tape on the edge here of the zipper, I do suggest you remove it because it's not fun to sew over, especially with nothing covering it. And we're gonna sew along the sides and the bottom, all at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, all the way around from one corner all the way to the other. Make sure you're sewing over the zipper teeth as well. Also make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. Alrighty, once you have it all sewn, you can trim down the seam allowance if you want, or you can just leave it. I'm just gonna leave it. Okay, you can set this to the side now. Alright, so now we're gonna repeat that with the main front lining panel. I'm just gonna get you set up, but then I'm gonna install all of it off camera because it is exactly the same as what we just did. But you're gonna grab your lining panel for the main front, and then also your remaining little zipper accent. And once again, add the double-sided tape to the back of your zipper accent. All right, and for this one, you're going to mark the midpoint on the top of your lining panel and then measure 2 inches down. Make sure you also mark that midpoint on the 2-inch line. Grab your accent panel and mark the midpoint on the top edge of your accent panel. Make sure you're doing it with some sort of a marking tool, not scissors. And then you're gonna lay your accent panel right side up, and the top edge is gonna go right along that 2-inch mark, centered using the midpoints. And we're gonna tape this down, and we're gonna install this lining zipper exactly like we did with the previous zipper we just did. It's the exact same method. So just follow that and I'll meet you back here. All right, so once you have your zipper pocket done, you can set this panel to the side. So now grab your lining slip pocket, and I find that the slip pocket is pretty tall, so if you wanted to cut about 1 inch or 1.5 inches off of the bottom of this, you definitely could, because I do find that the slip pocket reaches like the very top of the bag. But I'm gonna leave it as is just to show you. So take your lining slip pocket and lay it right side up, and then fold it right sides together so the short edges come to meet one another, and clip along the sides. Now we're gonna take this to the sewing machine and just sew along both clipped edges. This is just the sides of the pocket at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end, and you're gonna leave this top edge open. Once you have those sides sewn, use your scissors and just clip the corners down. So we're just cutting the corners off at about a 45-degree angle. And then you can take your pocket and flip it right side out. And grab your turning tool to help you poke out those corners. Try to get this to be a nice, clean rectangle. All right, and then you can grab an iron and iron this down to flatten it out. I just grabbed some clips to help with that. Now grab your slip pocket accent, and on the wrong side, draw a line going down the center lengthwise. Once you have your midpoint mark made, grab some double-sided tape and add some double-sided tape along both sides of that drawn line. So just running parallel to that drawn line. I'm just doing it kind of in the center between the raw edge and the line. Okay, now with the pocket with the raw edge side up, so the raw edge side is the top, we're going to remove the bottom piece of tape on that accent and just center this pocket over the accent, lining up the raw edge with that midpoint line. Remove any clips you need to, and then you can remove the paper off the top piece of tape and fold this down so that it's just covering the top raw edge. All right, now we can go to the sewing machine. We're just going to top stitch right along the raw edge of the accent at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you have that top stitched in place, you can trim down the accent so it's the same width as the top of the pocket. So now you're going to grab your main back lining panel and mark the midpoint along the bottom edge, and then measure 2.5 inches up from that bottom edge. Mark the midpoint on the bottom of your slip pocket, and you're going to line up the slip pocket midpoints together, and then line up the bottom edge of your slip pocket with that 2.5 inch mark. And you can see that it gets very close to the top edge of the lining panel. That's why I said if you wanted to make this a little bit shorter, that's probably a good idea. I think it's fine. I don't find it gets in the seam allowance, but it is close, so shortening it by about 1 inch or 2 inches is fine. So now I'm going to grab my paper tape, and I'm going to tape this pocket in place. And now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine, and I'm going to top stitch along the sides and the bottom at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end over here at the top. All right, once you have this top stitch in place, if you want to add little divider pockets here, you can. If you want to add rivets on the top, you can as well. I think I will add rivets this time. So I'm going to add the rivets just on the top corners of my pocket, because that's where there's going to be the most pressure put on those threads, and I don't want them to rip. All right, once your pocket's done, you can set it to the side. So this is where things start to get a little confusing, because we've got a lot of pieces and a lot of names for a lot of pieces, and a lot of them are very similar. So I'm going to walk you through this. So you're going to take both of your exterior center divider panels and line them up along the bottom edge with your lining. And then you're going to take this to a sewing machine and you're going to baste along this bottom clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So now this is what your center panel should look like. Everything is basted on the bottom edge and the flap is separate. All right, once you have that basted, grab your main front and back lining panels and flip them over. So this is the one with the slip pocket and the one with the little zipper pocket. And then on the back side of these, measure down 3/4 inch from the top edges and draw a horizontal line. This is going to help us place the center pocket with the lining. All right, now grab your main back lining panel and lay it right side up. And then grab your center divider panel, and with the credit card pockets right side up, we're gonna lay these together. Now with these two, both right sides up, line up the bottom edges and clip along this bottom edge. Now you can go baste along this bottom edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, now move the zipper towards the center of your zipper pocket, and you're going to pull down the side on the back lining panel so that it meets up with the side of the center panels. And you know what, if it's easier, this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go to the sewing machine real quickly, and I'm going to baste down these side panels at an 1/8 inch seam allowance, because we do have 4 different layers here and they're not connected in any way. So I'm gonna arrange them so that they're all lined up on the side panels here, and that's gonna make it a lot easier to attach the lining. So I'm gonna do this for both sides of this center pocket. Like I said, it's 4 layers, 2 exterior layers and 2 lining layers. And I have the back linings out of the way. I should have done this before I attached the back lining, but it is what it is. So I'm going to quickly go to the sewing machine, and I'm just going to baste at an 1/8 inch seam allowance along the sides of my center pocket. Okay, so that's going to make this a lot easier. So now what we're going to do is we're going to pull this back lining panel side up to meet the side of this center pocket here. And just match up the bottom corner and the sides. It's not going to reach all the way up to the top. It's not supposed to. It's not even supposed to reach up to that 3/4 inch mark. Just like that. And then grab your front lining panel and lay it right side down over your card slot pockets and include it in these side clips over here. So just pick up the side clips and include this in there. And then continue clipping the back lining panel and the front lining panels right sides together all the way up to the top corner. Make sure the flap is out of the way. Now we're going to take this to the sewing machine, and on the top here we're going to sew at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, and as we go down towards the bottom we're going to go down to a 5/8 inch seam allowance. I do find it easiest to start at the bottom and work my way to the top, and I use a zipper foot. If you can't do 3/8 inch right next to the zipper over here, that's fine. Just get as close as you can to it and make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. So we have one side done. It's not pretty, it's okay. So then we're gonna work on the other side. So I'm just gonna kind of lift the front lining panel out of the way, and looking at the back lining panel, I'm going to line up the bottom right corner with the bottom right corner of my center pocket here. And I'm just going to clip these together. And then I'm gonna take my front lining panel, move it over, and then add it to the clip. So once again, lining it up with that bottom right corner over here, including it in the clips that I already have, and then moving it all the way up to the top so it meets up with that back lining panel, right sides together. Move the flap out of the way. And then once again, we're going to sew along this side with a 3/8 inch seam allowance at the top and a 5/8 inch seam allowance at the bottom. Get as close as you can to the zipper tab and make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. All right, once you have both of the sides sewn on, if you want to trim down the 5/8 inch part of the seam just in half, you can. So I just pretty much trim below the zipper. So my zipper tabs, I can feel them, they're right there, and I'm just gonna trim down below that to reduce the bulk. And then the pattern doesn't mention what to do with this other bottom edge of your front lining panel. So I'm gonna tell you to sew it down. So on the bottom edge here, you're going to just clip that front lining panel bottom to the bottom that's already quite a few layers. It gets bulky here. This is why I said don't use a thick vinyl. We're just gonna clip these together, and we're gonna go to the sewing machine and just sew along this bottom edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance and backstitch at the beginning and the end. Okay, so now the bottom is cleaned up. So this next step is what I believe is the hardest step. We need to box these corners, but it's thick and not everything lines up. So open your zipper all the way, reach your hand inside the zipper pocket so you can spread open these two exterior and lining cuts. And we want to bring the side seam here to meet up with this bottom seam. Now you can see the lining panels of the front and back main lining panels are wider than the inner pocket. That's okay. It's going to be messy, but it's going to be fine in the end. No one sees this. So I'm just going to pull these two seams together, and I'm going to rotate the seams in opposite directions. So my side seam is going towards the left, my bottom seam is going towards the right. And right now I'm just focused on getting those seams matched up as best as you can. If it's not a straight cut here, that's fine. We just want to make sure we sew all the layers. That's it. So I'm going to get both sides of the seam clipped, and you'll see that the lining extends further. That's okay. Just clip that as well. It's all going to be sandwiched together. So now you're going to sew along this edge at a 5/8 inch seam allowance. That is a big seam allowance, and it will allow you to catch all the layers. So if you've got a little bit of wobbly layers going on over by the seam, that's okay. Everything will get caught. 5/8 of an inch, backstitch at the beginning and the end. Okay, once you have that box corner stitched, you can trim down the seam. I just cut it in half. There you go. And now we're going to repeat for the other side, but I'll walk you through it again because I know this is a tricky bit. So once again, I reach my hand into the zipper pocket so I can spread open all the layers. And I'm just going to flip my seams so they go in opposite directions. This is to help avoid too much bulk when I'm sewing. It can be very difficult to get them to meet. That's okay. Just get them as close as you can. Just do your best. And then clip these together along that edge. And then add clips to the lining that overextends the sides. Again, if those things don't match up perfectly, that's fine. And then once again, we're going to sew along this boxed corner at a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. Okay, once you have that sewn, trim this seam down in half so it's not so bulky. So now this is what the inside of the bag looks like. We pretty much just got done sewing the entire inside of the bag, and then we're going to sew the outside of the bag, and then we're just going to sew them together. So before we move on to the next step, if your 3/4 of an inch mark on the top has disappeared, you're going to want to redraw it. And then once you have that 3/4 of an inch mark, you're going to grab some double-sided tape and add the double-sided tape just above that line. And you can do this in sections if it's easier. And once you have your tape applied, what we want to do is we want to fold back this top edge of our lining, wrong side back, so wrong sides together, and the top edge is going to go over the tape, and it's going to meet up with that 3/4 of an inch mark. So just go slow. It can be kind of hard to get it started, but then it should get easier after you get going. And when you get to the side seams over here, spread the seam open and then fold it down. Okay, and the point of folding this back is because this is the top seam of your lining. We're not going to be sewing anything right sides together and then turning right side out. This is just it. So make sure it's nice and clean and exactly as you like it. And now you can set this to the side. So now grab your main front panel and the pattern piece for it. And we need to add just a couple more magnetic snaps. So lay this right side up on the right side of your exterior panel. And then just like we did before, we're going to transfer the dots for these female snaps onto the exterior panel. And use your hole punch to punch out the holes, or use your washer to mark placement for the slits, and use your seam ripper to cut the material for those prongs. So now grab your female snaps and just install it so the snap is on the right side. And you can see I'm not adding any extra Decovil light here because I already have Decovil light on the back of this panel. So I'm just gonna snap this in, and then I'm gonna grab my rivet press, make sure you have the right die in there, and then I'm just gonna press this down. This is also where the pattern suggests to add your bag tag. So I'm just going to kind of place it underneath this right snap. And honestly, I'm just kind of eyeballing this. So that's where I'm going to put that with some double-sided tape, and I'm just going to top stitch along all 4 edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So now grab your main front panel and your main back panel and lay them both wrong sides up. And then using a ruler and a fabric pen, mark 3/4 of an inch down from the top edge and draw horizontal lines on the wrong side, just like we did with the lining. Now grab your front and back exterior panels and lay them right sides together. And then we're going to clip the bottom edges together. So we're only working on the bottom edges right now. So use your clips to hold these in place. And then we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along this bottom clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. Once you have these sewn, open up the panels away from each other and then press this seam open. If you want to use double-sided tape to help stick it down, go ahead and do that. I find I can just kind of press it with my fingers, and then I'll just work on it at the sewing machine. So we're going to take this back to the sewing machine, and we're going to top stitch along both sides of this seam at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And just make sure you're constantly lifting up the material and checking that that seam on the back is pressed open. The point of this top stitching is to hold those 2 parts of the seam down so it's very flat. Once you have the bottom top stitched, flip the front and back panel so that they're right sides together, and let's match up these side seams over here. So just corner to corner, clip these side seams right sides together. Make sure you keep the flap out of the way. And do the same on the other side. And before we start sewing, make sure your D-rings are faced in towards the center, not towards the seam. We don't want to accidentally sew over those. So now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along both sides at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. All right, once you have the sides sewn, now we're going to box the corners. So bring the bottom seam up to meet the side seam, and you can spread open the side seam as well. And then use clips to clip these together, and if you need to, you can spread out further towards the middle of the bag, and that'll help straighten out these corners. So do this for both of your corners. And now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along these 2 box corners at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. If you want, you can also do a second row of stitching at about a 1/4 inch seam allowance, especially if you're using thicker vinyl. All right, once you have your corners boxed, flip your bag so it's right side out. It's looking so cute. So now what we want to do is fold down the top edge of this bag, but first we got to add our double-sided tape. So this part's a little tricky. So again, if you want to do it in sections, you definitely can. But what we're going to do is we're going to find our 3/4 of an inch mark that we made on the back of our exterior panels, and we're just going to apply the tape right above that line. And when I get to the side seams, I spread them open, and then I apply the tape over the seam like that to help hold it open. All right, and once you have the tape applied, remove the paper and fold this raw edge down, wrong sides together, so the raw edge is meeting that 3/4 of an inch marked line, and press it down, just adhering it to the tape. All right, so once you have the top taped down, this is how your bag should look. It's pretty much like a finished bag with nothing inside. So now you have your exterior and you have your interior, and this is why it's called the drop-in lining, because we have the lining built as a separate bag and the exterior built as a separate bag, and we just drop the lining in and sew it together. So you're going to want to pull your bag so that the front panel is up, and then the pocket that has the card slot is forward facing as well. And we're just going to insert this in. So another thing to look at is both flaps should be lining side up, and we're just going to push the lining into the exterior. Lining and exterior are all wrong sides together. All right, so you don't have to be delicate with it. So we're going to start with the side seams. Match up your side seams of your lining with your exterior and clip those together. And I find it helpful for this middle flap, this inner flap here, I'm just gonna tuck it into the pocket. I know it's gonna get wrinkled, that's okay. I'll deal with that later. But I need it out of the way. The back flap, you can actually just flip out of the way just like that. So then go to the other side seams and match up the lining and exterior side seams and clip together. And so we have no raw edges on the top here. Everything is folded down. And then we're just gonna go around the top of the bag, clipping the lining and the exterior together. I like to make my lining just like a scotch lower than the exterior so it doesn't peek out in the end. Okay, now you have two different ways you can sew this top edge together. You can sew it from the inside, so lay it on your bed and sew from the inside, the lining side, at a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. This means the bobbin thread will be what you see on the outside of the bag. Or you can remove the table off your sewing machine if that's an option for you, and you can wrap this around the arm of your sewing machine and you can top stitch from the right side of the exterior, which is what I prefer. Either way, you want to go around the entire top of the bag at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I do suggest back stitching at the beginning and the end and tying off the threads. Go slow and use a zipper foot. All right, I know not everybody likes drop-in linings that much. This wasn't that bad though. It really wasn't that bad. The biggest thing is you got to make sure you caught the lining. As long as the lining is caught, then you're fine. So take your flap out. If it's a little crinkly, you can smooth it out. And then you can grab your magnetic snaps and snap it to the bottom of the bag, just like that. And then grab your other flap and snap that flap to the first flap. How stinking cute is this? Then let's get our strap and attach our strap to our strap connector. Oh, this bag is fun. Look how bright that is. And I'm pretty sure that this lime green vinyl here, I'm pretty sure that glows in the dark. So I'm excited to try that out. Isn't this a fun bag? I hope you love making it as much as I do. So I'll be honest, Mila picked out, my daughter, Mila, she picked out the material for the bag we did in the tutorial today. And I was I was like, I don't know about those colors, but they look so good together. I love this like coral color with this lime over here, this, oh, what is it called? Like a mint, like a really light mint, but it glows in the dark too. So if I take this bag in the dark, I've already been playing with it. It looks so cool in the dark with these little glowy spots. And oh my gosh, the vinyl just feels so good. It feels so good, so soft. I love this bag so much, you guys. Look at how stinking cute this is. It just comes together so nicely. Is it gonna take you a day, maybe a weekend of carefully following the instructions to put it together? Yeah, it's not fast. It doesn't need to be a fast bag. This is a bag that as long as you take your time and you follow the instructions, it's gonna turn out super perfect. And I hope that whatever tips I offered today were helpful to you. Because I need you to make this bag. I do. I just really want you guys to make this. It is so beautiful, and you're going to love it as much as I do. Like, it's such a professional look and feel, and it is, honestly, it's one of the most beautiful bags I've ever made. So I hope you enjoyed sewing with me today. If you made this pattern using the tutorial, please make sure you tag me if you share it on social media. I'm OklaRoots everywhere. If you just want to send me a picture of what you made, you can email me. I'm Jessica@OklaRoots.com. If you love this pattern, you want to see the other pattern they have on the channel, please make sure you leave a comment down below. I hope you're having a great day. Have a fantastic rest of your week. Get out there and make something. Bye, guys.